Now, their constitution in Japan, when it was written by MacArthur, was the one that actually wrote and approved our constitution, or he had people do it for him. But anyway, it gave women 100% equal rights in that nation. But culturally, they don't have the same equal rights. Socially, they do because of the Constitution, but they're not treated quite the same. They don't walk 2 steps behind their husband anymore. Very infrequently you would see that. The older generation, you'd see the wife stepping, or, you know, my wife always walks behind me. But, kidding. But, yeah, anyway, but yes, you will see the older generation doing that. And, you know, offenses against women are not on the same level as men normally. Yeah. But it is more normal than it used to be to us. But like I said, I lived in Malaysia, I've been to Indonesia, yeah, all over Southeast Asia, and women are treated like they would treat them here. And people would just understand this. Oh yeah, that's my lot in life. So, I mean, we can't impose our values on this and say what's here is wrong when this is just the way the society was run. We have to go in and actually have a heart change in the society, and that may take years and years, or it may never come about. So just so you know, but if in fact it's true about the guys coming under the protection of his house, then we can understand why he did this as Westerners. If not, then it's kind of hard for us to fall into this. Now that we're at this particular verse, this is repeated. This exact account is repeated in the book of Judges. Has anybody ever come across that? We'll go to it for a little while, and we'll just read it, just so you know that this was not unique to Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so I'll read it just to save time. And it's kind of long, but we might as well read it, just so you know that this actually happened in Israel. It came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel that there was a certain Levite, this is 19, Judges 19, Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him and went from his father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there 4 whole months. So she took off on him. It says she played the harlot. Whether she actually did anything with anybody, I think it's probably just that he left. She left her, you know, whatever. She's the concubine, so there must be a term for him, you know, a harem master or whatever. But she went back to Dad's house. Okay, then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the father, maybe he mistreated her and she just took off on him. I don't know, but it says he went down there and spoke kindly to her to bring her back, okay? Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him and stayed with him 3 days, so they ate and drank and lodged there. Then it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning, and he stood to depart, but the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward go your way. So they sat down, and the 2 of them ate and drank together. Then the young woman's father said to the man, please be content to stay all night, and let your heart be merry. And when the man stood to depart, his father-in-law urged him, so he lodged there again. Then he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart. But the young woman's father said, please refresh your heart. So they delayed until afternoon, and both of them ate. And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine, his servant, his father-in-law, the young woman's father said to him, look, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Lodge here that your heart may be merry. Tomorrow go your way so that you may get home. Now, you see, the father just wants his daughter to stay. You know, he's probably lonely. Maybe he's living alone. And he's getting them, you know, a little merry in the morning, some food and some wine or whatever. And the guy, by the end of the day, is like, it's too late to go. We'll go tomorrow. But finally, it says in verse 10, however, the man was not willing to spend that night there, so he rose and departed and came opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. Jebus means the city of the Jebusites, okay, which is one of the group of people that they were told to eradicate, but they never did do that. And just so you know, you won't see a conflict in this, but they, in other words, Jebus was a city within Israel that was still run by the Jebusites until the time of David. Okay, they had conquered everything around it, but they had never conquered Jebus or Jerusalem until the time of David. What?
It's 1927 or we're Jebusites?
Yeah, the Jebusites. But I am right now in verse 11. Yeah, so they were near Jebus, right, and the day was far spent, and the servant said to his master, come, please, and let us turn aside into the city. So the servant who was with his master and his concubine, said, let's turn into the city of the Jebusites, okay, and lodge in it. But his master, the guy who's went down to get his concubine, said to him, we will not turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not of the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah. Okay, so he's saying these people can't be trusted. We're going to go to where we can trust the people, right? So he said to his servant, come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah. And they passed by and went their way, and the sun went down on them in Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin. Who is from the tribe of Benjamin in the Bible? Pick some people. First king of Israel? Saul was from Benjamin. And who else? New Testament, author of 13 books of the Bible, maybe 14? Paul. He brags about being from the tribe of Benjamin, and part of the reason why is here. Anyway, but not the context of what's here, but what happens later. Anyway, spend the night. Just then an old man came from his work in the field at evening, who was also from the mountains of Ephraim. He was staying in Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. So he's not a Benjamite, he's from Gibeah. All right, and when he raised his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city, and the old man said, where are you going, and where do you come from? So he said to him, we are passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah. Now I am going to the house of the Lord, but there is no one who will take me into his house. Although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself, for your female servant, and for the young man who is with your servant, there is no lack of anything. Okay, so he's saying, we can take care of ourselves if somebody just gives us a place to stay. Okay, and the old man said, peace be with you. Or shalom, probably in Hebrew. However, let all your needs be my responsibility. So not only is he going to give him a place to stay, he's going to take care of everything. All right? Only do not spend the night in the open square. So he brought him into his house and gave fodder to the donkeys, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, or the term in, what's that? Wicked. The term in Hebrew would be sons of Belial. Okay, Belial is the god of the Lord of the Flies, I believe. Anyway, these men of Belial surrounded the house and beat on the door. Now, I'm not sure, and I'll check on this in a minute, but I think the Gibeonites were not Israelites. I may be wrong that Gibeon is part of Israel, but I don't know if they're actually, they're not. As a matter of fact, and I can tell you, the Gibeonites are the people when Joshua went into the promised land and he was told to destroy all these cities, and the Gibeonites are the ones that fooled Joshua. I want to give you this point for a reason. They are the ones that fooled Joshua, and they put on these old clothes. They brought this old moldy bread with them. Their sandals were all worn out, and they showed up at Joshua's camp and they said, listen, we're from a far, far away place, and we want to make a treaty with you. Look, when we left, our bread was new, and now look, it's old and moldy, and look at our sandals are all worn out from the walk. And they deceived Joshua. Joshua did not inquire of the Lord, and he made a covenant with the Gibeonites. Okay? And once you've made a covenant, that's it. So the Gibeonites came under the protection of Joshua and the people of Israel. But the next day or a day later, whenever they found out that they were wrong, he said, why did you lie to us? And he says, well, we'd rather be alive than killed, right? And he says, for that, you're going to be our stonecutters, our masons, you're going to be our bearers of heavy loads forever, right? And they said, it's better than being killed. So, so the Gibeonites were given this this covenant and this protection. Okay, so this man is a Gibeonite. He is not a member of Israel. Now, when you're thinking of this, think of the parable that Jesus gave of the Good Samaritan. You have the people of Israel, the Levite, the priest, and all these people that didn't help, and the Gibeonites did. So just keep that in mind because it's a good parallel. So here we go. We have... I don't know where I stopped off. 22. Here we come to the account, the parallel with Sodom. See you later, Dave. Have a great day. As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men, they came out and they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring out the man who came to your house that we may know them carnally. Exact same term as Sodom and Gomorrah. But the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Same thing is going on that happened at Sodom and Gomorrah. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage. Look, here's my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now, humble them, and do to them as you please, but to this man do not do such a vile thing. But the men would not heed him, so the man took his concubine and brought her out to them, and they knew her and abused her all night until morning, and when the day began to break, they let her go. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was till it was light. When the master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. She couldn't even get it open up the door. She just fell right there with her hands right there. Then he said to her, "Get up and let us be going." Probably gave her a little kick. "Come on, you." But there was no answer. The man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and set her throughout all the territory of Israel. Actually, the term limb by limb is with her bones. He cut up everything, and so it was that all who saw it said, "No such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up." And then we read in chapters 20 through 21 what is the repercussions of what happened, and that is where the book of Judges ends. And it leads us into the book of Samuel. Still the time of the Judges, but there's a reason why that's in here. We won't get into that right now. We'll get into it in a few months. But the story is the same. The outcome was a little bit different. Not entirely different, but what happened here is the same. And just because these people were of the covenant of Israel does not mean that they were not as wicked as Sodom and Gomorrah. And the term Sodom and Gomorrah is applied in the Old Testament to Jerusalem, to Israel, and Ezekiel, elsewhere he says,
Revelation.
Yes, Sodom and Egypt. That's right. So, but I think it's Ezekiel where he says to the people, he says, what Sodom and Gomorrah did, or what Sodom did, I think he says just Sodom. He says, what you've done is even worse than them. So, in other words, wickedness is pervasive, even in the covenant people. But
if this was all in the same time here.
Well, yeah, this is before.
I mean, is Sodom and Gomorrah and this thing in Judges?
It's about 450, 500 years later, maybe even longer. Yeah, it's considerably later. It's after the time in Egypt. It's after the Exodus from Egypt. It's after the law of Moses. It's after they've been in there. They've gone through all of the judges. It's still going on. That's right. And so, it's just to show us that the same type of depravity is going on, and it happens in Christian circles too. What was it he said in that sermon yesterday? This guy said he was a Navy SEAL and lied to everybody. And, we got people that just, we don't think clearly. This is human nature, and that's why these are included in here, is to show us how utterly depraved we are. And just because we're of a particular people, we're no different than that. And every one of us has this ability in our heart, whether you deny it or not. We do. And I'm going to give you an example before we go on, is during the siege of, I believe it's Samaria, where it's the siege of Samaria later in the book of Kings, I think, where, these people are living under the siege. There's a famine, and one of the ladies said to the king, she said, "Oh, king, give me justice." And he said, "What's up?" And he says, "Well, I have my child, and my neighbor had her child, and we made an agreement to cook my child and eat him today, and then to eat her child tomorrow. And she's reneged on her promise after we ate our own son." And this person, I guarantee you, when there was no famine, never would have even considered that. It would have been the last thing on their mind. But if you read Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, it says that the woman who was so tender and so gentle that she wouldn't even let her foot touch the ground because of her gentleness and tenderness, well, when she has her baby, will hide the afterbirth to eat it when her family isn't around because of the siege and the famine that's going on around you. That's part of the curses instead of the blessings. If they pay attention, they're blessed. If they don't, they're cursed. Now, in this particular account, and we're not going to read it, but what happened is that all of Israel gathered together and punishment was meted out on the Benjamites. They were almost completely wiped from the face of the earth. Every single Benjamite minus 600 men, okay? And all the women were killed, all the children were killed, everything except 600 Benjamites. And so what they did is they said they all mourned after taking vengeance on the Benjamites. The entire Israelite community mourned because they had taken an oath that nobody would give their daughter to a Benjamite, okay? Which means that they're all going to die. They're going to lose a tribe in Israel. And they mourned over that. How can we lose a tribe in Israel? This is part of the promise, is that he will save a remnant. And, they knew that there was a problem. So what they did is they devised a plan that when girls were coming out playing instruments from a particular festival, that they would allow the Benjamites to take these girls, these young virgins, and steal them away as wives, and then they would go to the fathers and say, please allow this, because you didn't allow it, so you haven't violated your covenant, but we don't want to lose a tribe in Israel. Well, the fact is that Benjamin went down from 20-some thousand at the time, men, at the time of the entrance into Israel, down to 600 people.